Hi, Deborah, DJ. Well, how would you prefer to be addressed?
People call me DJ now. It took a while for me to understand that that was actually what I answered to.
Uh-huh.
Having been born in 1952, a lot of us were named after Debbie Reynolds.
Okay. Yeah.
And so there were often a lot of people named Deborah.
Mm-hmm.
And when I
Mm-hmm.
went back to college, there were three of us in opera workshop. So I said, just call me DJ.
Right.
And then I found out 2 years later that that's all I answered to.
Isn't that awesome?
It is awesome. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, Deborah is a dulcimer player and a longtime member of various pagan communities on the West Coast. She's written some songs or been collaborated on some songs that we probably all know, right?
Yep.
So today, I think I want to ask you about your dulcimer playing and practicing dulcimer, because when I was reading your language around practice, I was immediately struck by these are things that I say to my students
Yeah.
about our spiritual practice
Mhm.
every day.
Yeah.
Every day. Preferably the same time of day, but at
Yeah.
least every day. So, could you talk a little bit about the necessity for practice in dulcimer? And then I think we can just talk back and forth
Mhm.
about whatever that brings up. We're so
Sure.
casual here.
Well, having also taught what I call Magic 101,
Hmm.
I realized that music is my spiritual practice. It always
Hmm.
has been. Um, I I remember making up songs in the bathtub when I was a girl, and singing to my toys and stuff like that. But finding the mountain dulcimer um, was really the beginning of my professional life, but I didn't know it at the time. And
Mm.
that was when I was about 27.
Hmm.
And if it had been piano or fiddle or guitar, there would have been a million people that I could have taken lessons with, but there weren't any teachers for mountain dulcimer in the San Francisco Bay Area. And to this day, that is still the case. I am the mountain dulcimer teacher in the San Francisco Bay Area, which seems really crazy. You have to go down to Santa Cruz before there's a couple more.
Oh.
And um, what I found was a voice that I could use to accompany my singing. And I needed to practice it. I needed to learn the instrument. And I needed to play it enough so that I was not fumbling over it while I was singing, because singing was my main expression for music at that time,
Right.
and remains so. But they're almost 50-50 now.
Uh-huh.
Almost. Not quite. And what I learned about practicing mountain dulcimer was something I'd never applied to my singing. Muscle memory. We talk about muscle memory whenever you're playing an instrument. Your
Hmm.
hands, your fingers, your body, all of this becomes a part of how you remember what you want to play, how you
Mm.
address it. And the only thing I say this right off, I say there is no substitute for practice. And I know because I've tried, right? Which always gets a laugh from my students. And I do
Mm.
that because laughter is a big way to teach. If
Yes.
people get a laugh at something, they're going to remember that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I remember going through Anadea Judith and Celine Kuman Vega's chakra class, and she was trying to get across the uh, the third eye chakra, right?
Hmm.
And what she said is, Life goes exactly the way you think it does, and that's why, right?
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh my god," I laughed so hard,
Yeah.
and I that was 30 years ago. I've never forgotten that,
Right.
right? So, adding a little humor usually works well.
Mhm.
And when people are practicing, I say, as far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as a bad practice because you're addressing it. You're addressing your art. You're addressing your body. You're addressing your instrument. You're becoming
Mhm.
more and more familiar with it. You're becoming more and more familiar with how you are with it
Right. Right.
and how you are without it, right? It's
Mhm.
different. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Do you ever tell your people when they're struggling? I do this when people are struggling with practice, with the practices that I teach. Well, don't do it. Don't do it and see how you like, don't do it with permission, right? To
Mhm.
not do it rather than not doing it because you're resenting it or you're resisting it or you're struggling against it or um but just don't do it and see how you feel
Mhm.
in comparison with how you remember feeling when you did it,
Right.
right?
There's definitely that.
Yeah.
What we
It's
have for us as musicians, though, is we talk about playing music, and that's what
mhm,
I say.
yeah,
Don't practice, just play.
yeah,
Don't memorize it. If you play
play it.
it, you'll know it.
Yeah, yeah. You wrote something about, so there's no substitute for practice. And then I forget the language that you used. I wish I had the document in front of me right now, but you said something about there's no shortcut.
Right. There's no shortcut. And I have it all in this. This is
Yeah,
my book. I love my book. Yeah, no
beautiful book.
shortcut. Thank you. Where do I have that
That you
practice thing?
not practicing won't get you there faster, and even practicing won't get you there faster.
Yeah, it's just all of my students are adults.
Yeah,
And the first thing I tell them is, as adults, we've learned a lot and we know a lot. And we know that we can figure things out. But this is not the same as learning how to type. And it's not the same as learning how your boss wants things done. And it's not the same as learning Excel spreadsheet.
right,
You know, this involves physical activity. You must do it. You can't understand your way to playing an instrument.
right,
And
right.
therefore you must be kind to yourself
Yes.
because beating yourself up, as you and I both know, is not going to get you there.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, once we attach, um, self-derision to whatever we're trying to learn or do or be, right? Um, then of course we're going to back away from it rather than go toward it. There's a way in which in our culture, nobody gets through our culture without some kind of abuse happening in their lives, right? Happening to us. If you did, congratulations. I'd love to meet you. Please
Mhm.
get in touch with me. um, one of the long-standing results of extensive periods of abuse is
Mhm.
that we begin to take on the voice of the abuser
Mhm.
toward ourself. And so when we approach something that we love,
Mhm.
right, we can back away from it because we're already telling ourselves we can't, right? We're not going to be good at it. I'm never going to get this. Why am I wasting my time? All of those gremlins that they're not ours. They came from somewhere. Someone put those messages in us, but it will never get you closer to the thing that you thought, "I should try that. I think I'll love that," right?
Mhm.
And then how we talk ourselves back from doing the practice. And these
Right.
are the things that whether you're practicing magic, whether you're practicing music, whether you're playing in a pottery studio, whether you're playing in a dance studio, whether you're learning to garden, whether you're learning to care for your infant, these are the ways that these things teach us about ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Everything is a teacher. Everything and everyone is a teacher if we can self-reflect.
Mhm.
If we self-reflect, like, why do I not want to pick up my mountain dulcimer? Why don't I want to light the candle on my altar? Why
Right.
am I ignoring the garden that I was excited about?
Are.
Yes.
And knowing ourselves more and more, better and better, more
Mhm,
thoroughly allows us to relate more to the people we encounter or have in our lives.
mhm,
It took me a while to understand. I think I said this to you when we were first talking
mhm,
a couple of years ago. I've come to realize that relationship has been the biggest teacher for me because relationships are important to me, and yet I find myself acting in ways that I do not want to act
mm,
in relation to that person, in relation to a particular situation with that person.
mm,
And and then I have to find a way to communicate what I need to and to pare away that which does not assist the situation. So the
right,
relationships are important. And I think that this is part of why I love to teach, because I'm constantly in relationship with a new group of people who have already expressed a desire to play this esoteric instrument.
right,
That's just esoteric simply because we don't know about it.
right.
But really, I can teach anybody. You sit down with me and a dulcimer and you're playing a tune within 3 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
It's that simple. That's the thing. It's
Mm,
that simple. It's not me. Pretty much every mountain dulcimer teacher will say the same thing.
mhm,
The
mhm,
accessibility makes it what's a possible expression of one's, well, just an instrument, literally, for personal expression.
right.
And
Beautiful.
it's, my goodness, I'm so convinced, Karina, that a lot of the ills in our society have to do with not valuing art, creativity.
Yes.
If we don't have creativity, we end up with tech bros, okay, who don't understand about the relationship aspect,
Right.
who don't understand that creativity is worth it for itself,
Mhm.
and and that each of us is worthy of affection, attention, love, just
Mm,
because we're here.
yes. I think it's a human imperative to be creative. If you just watch children, right? So I would go to the beach. Adults go to the beach to relax, right? But if you watch children on the beach, they are working, right? They are working at creating castles, tunnels, angels in the sand, right? Dragging buckets of water up the beach from the ocean, pouring it into the moats that they made. If you give children crayons and paper, they'll create, right? If you give them eggs and flour, they'll create. And I wonder what it is that so much of our culture is distanced from that impulse, right? That's a human impulse. It's play and creativity, music, art, dance, whatever it is that you make, right? That can be making your grandma's spaghetti sauce in the kitchen,
Right.
right? Um, but these are somehow add-ons, right, that we do after the work, right?
That's what I would say Western capitalistic society
Mhm.
has.
Yep.
It's like only those who are of the upper echelon get to be, the Medicis of our culture, the
Right.
ones who commission the mosaics and the paintings. If you've ever
Mhm.
stood in front of Botticelli's, rise
Yep.
birth of
Mhm.
Venus, which of course I had seen pictures of all my life, but standing
Same.
in front of it takes up the whole room, takes up the whole wall of that gallery. It's bigger
I
than my house.
I know. I stood there for, like, an hour. I watched everyone come in, snap a picture, and leave, and I just wept. I couldn't believe how big it was.
I
She's
know.
taller than me
I
in the
know.
painting.
So the Medicis got to do that,
Yeah.
you know. I'm going to try not to get too political because we're all steeped in that right now. But one of the
But we're
things,
steeped in it, so we have to talk about it.
okay, we'll talk about it
Yeah.
some,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about the people like Carnegie who chose to give libraries all across the country. There's Carnegie libraries. We have 3 of them in the East Bay I can drive to.
Wow.
in
Mhm.
in the San Francisco Bay Area, right? There's Carnegie Hall. There's all of that stuff. Now, he was a robber baron.
Yeah.
He was,
Mhm.
but he was also just the Medicis. They were basically war chiefs,
Yes.
right? So all of that is part of the same thing, but it is the cultures that I really enjoy are like Thailand and West Africa
Mhm.
and um, and a lot of the stuff in the early Moorish days, you know,
Yes.
where the limitation was you couldn't depict animals or humans. It had to be geometric designs, maybe plants, botanical designs, but it
Yeah.
was not allowed by the Quran to depict a human in your art.
Mhm.
And yet, look at what they made.
Right. Right.
Look at that beautiful stuff. And if you don't know about it, just, Google Moorish mosaics.
Yeah.
It's just astonishing.
Mm.
And that limitation aspect is also what I feel is incredibly important because it's not about having everything. It's about creating what you can with what you have.
Right. Right. Yeah.
What's in the
Y
kitchen? Make something wonderful out of it.
yes.
I had a group of friends who were like that. We called it the Friday Night Supper Club.
Mhm.
After work, most of us were doing 9 to 5 jobs, and several of us worked together in the same place. We got each other jobs, so we would get together and we say, "Well, let's have dinner tonight." Okay, I've got X and Y and Z in my refrigerator. Oh, okay. Well, we'll come to your house then. What do you need? Okay. Well, I'll let you know after I get home. I'll say, okay. Well, I've got this and this and this, but I could use some basil. Okay, I'll get you the basil on the way, and we could use some wine. Okay, I got some wine. I'll bring that, and we would do this on Fridays and we would cook for each other and with each other
Mm.
and have a marvelous evening of um, making music and eating and drinking. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned to cook.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. The closest thing that, we've done to that is just like potlucks, right? Like everybody bring whatever you have, or we're doing a potluck, but it's sort of Indian style,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Like bring something in that palette or from that
Hmm.
part of the world, right? Or we're doing Mediterranean, right? And brings whatever that means to you, bring that.
Oh, that sounds fun
Um,
too.
yeah, and so there's still like a theme, but people are still, doing the majority of the cooking by
Mhm.
ourselves. So then we just sit down and gab and laugh and
Yeah.
play. Yeah.
This is the same group of people that I learned a lot of my folk material from.
Hmm.
Very steeped in Martin Carthy and Pentangle and Fairport Convention, all of the British folk rock folks.
Hmm.
And also, we had a tradition of getting together for sacred harp singing. Sacred harp singing is deep Americana. It's hymns, but the shape notes were so that it was easier for people who did not read music. They just read the shapes and they knew what the notes were.
Oh,
And the tradition is that every time there's a fifth Sunday, you'd get together for a shape note sing. So that's what we did. And we did a potluck, and everybody had their books, and we said, okay, do number 42. Okay, we're singing number 42 now. Everybody had a part to sing, and we would all sing it.
beautiful.
I know.
Beautiful.
I had tradition within tradition, and I really appreciated that because that
Hmm.
wasn't part of the way things went when I was growing up in my suburban home,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right.
Piano lessons were Saturday morning,
Right.
and my older brother was one of these kids that he took it really seriously. He practiced before he did anything else when he came home. And my mom played piano, and so of course I had to play piano.
Right. Yeah.
And my dad listened. He was a good listener.
Hmm.
Um, so that was the kind of structure we had. It wasn't about enjoying it together.
Mm,
It was just you do that.
yeah. It makes a difference.
It does.
It
It
makes a
does.
difference. Yeah. So, Deb, what are some of the songs that you don't have to sing them? But I just want people to know who you are because I think my audience is different than your dulcimer
Hmm.
audience, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure that there's some crossover.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I want people to know who we're talking to today and some of your history in the early days of neo-pagan culture,
Hmm.
culture building, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
The people that you were hanging out with and spending time with and doing ritual with and building community with were really building culture. This was the early days of the neo-pagan movement in the
Hmm.
United States.
And I am still circling with some of those people. I
Mhm.
mean, deeply. I mean, we get together since the pandemic. We get together on Zoom every Friday
Oh,
since the pandemic
beautiful.
started, and we've even done ritual online. But we're
Mhm.
really grateful to be able to get together in person again.
Yeah.
Um, so the main thing, to put the biggest thing out, is my brother and I. We had I had come upon the Church of All Worlds,
Mhm.
and they had a piece of land up in Ukiah, California. So Northern California, and it was a huge ranch called Greenfield Ranch, and it had been parceled off into 220 or 55-acre parcels.
Mhm.
And the Church of All Worlds was in ownership of a 55-acre parcel called Unavan, which was owned by Gwydion Penderwyn. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I never have known if I pronounced that right, but it's Welsh. And he had passed on literally the fall before I came in at Beltane.
Oh, wow.
So
So we're talking mid-70s. No?
late
Late 70s?
1979,
Okay.
78, 79,
Okay.
like that. And uh, it's possible that, let's see, I'm trying to think. 1984 is when my husband and I got married. It was the year before 83 that we started going to Donovan and
Mhm.
Coidenbrith, which was where Otterzell and Morning Glory lived.
Okay.
And, and on the piece of land that was Onivan, which was connected by what did we call that hill? It's like the hill that killed every car. Um, uh, the Greenway, I think, is what it was called, and
Mhm.
they were connected. And on that land lived Eldri Little Wolf
Okay.
and Aisha Homolka,
Mhm.
and they were considered stewards. When Gwydion died, he had put the land in the care of 4 or 5 women stewards, those two and Anadea Judith,
Mhm.
and at least a few others. There was
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 of them.
Mhm.
And I became, we just went to the Beltane the first year that they did it on Coidenbrith. And from there on, it was like, okay, these are my people.
Yeah.
This is what I want. And I was involved there for 10 years, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and while we were there, we formed a circle with my brother and his wife, um, my husband, and several friends of various kinds. And Rick, my brother Rick Hamouris, it wrote a song called "We Are a Circle Within a Circle," and
Mhm.
he wrote it for our friend Robin Weber, who was going off to hunt for the mermaids with Otter and Morning Glory and Tom Williams over near New Zealand.
Mhm.
It's quite the colorful background, and a huge opening of my life. But "We Are a Circle Within a Circle," we recorded it on the album Welcome to Onivan, which was my first recording. My brother was known mostly as a rock and roll artist,
Mhm.
um, and you'll hear him on that as well. Welcome to Onivan is the album, and the song is "We Are a Circle Within a Circle," which Rick wrote. What we love about that song is 2 things. People attribute it as a traditional Sufi chant,
Interesting.
but they don't know the verses for the elements,
Mhm.
which it has those. And every time,
I'll link it to Spotify so that people can go listen to it.
yeah, yeah. Well, they can also hear it if they search for Hamouris
Mhm.
on YouTube. The
Mhm.
whole album is on YouTube.
Great.
Um, but the other thing I love is whenever I meet Starhawk, because she's here and in the area, she always
Right.
tells me of another language that song has been translated into and sung back at her.
Wow.
You know,
Amazing.
amazing. I know it is. So from there, I really learned a lot about the pagan community from the people who say they came up with the term neo-pagan, and I think that's not arguable. Um, but no one's perfect,
No one is perfect.
and no one has all the aspects of what works with other people
Right.
in place. One of the things I learned from many of the individuals there, who I still love deeply, very much, even though I'm not
Mhm.
practicing with them, is, for example, Morning Glory, who has gone ahead and is one of my ancestors now.
Mhm.
She had the hardest time ever making anything on time. I'm not telling tales by saying that. Everybody knew
Right.
that. But because she had difficulty with that, she had worked many different ways to be able to learn how to focus on what she needed to learn. And she's the one who taught me focus because of that.
I remember us talking about that. Yeah.
So there are something you can learn about people that are, if you pay enough attention, to help your own path.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was in the early 80s. Anadea Judith was my mentor, my largest mentor. She's still out there teaching and working with the chakras. She's the first one that I know of that connected um, Eastern uh, the chakra system with Western psychology.
Okay.
And it's really been worthwhile for me understanding what areas of my life needed more attention,
Yes.
what
Yeah.
areas were blocked, what areas were really open, um, and balancing.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing about that,
Yeah,
which
sure.
is one of the things I realized is, you know, there's this phrase in all things. And what
Hmm.
I say is moderation in everything, including moderation. One must feel joy.
Yes.
One must just, dance and sing and feel ecstasy and be connected in ways where it brings tears to your eyes. Some of my favorite times with my students are when I know how hard they've been working and they get there and I'm just like, I can't even speak. I
Yeah.
can't even speak.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
look at them, and if they let me, I hug them.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to bring back Big Crone Energy podcast, there are layered reasons,
Yep.
um, but there was this moment this fall when Kamala Harris was being interviewed by somebody, some white man, for a news show. And he asked her a question, and she started to answer, and he started to talk over her. And she kept trying to answer the question, and he kept talking over her
Mm,
until she said, "Excuse me, I am speaking. You asked me a question. I am speaking." And I identified with that moment, right? Not that I'm being interviewed by men, but that I do find that women's voices in the pagan community, in the magical community, I'm old enough to remember when our voices were elevated. There were always men who had loud voices. Let's just say that. But when the women spoke, we were listened to. And I think something has changed around that in the
mm,
last maybe decade and a half. When I ask people who are the teachers that they know,
mm,
invariably it is a list of men,
mm,
right?
mhm,
Whose books are you reading?
mm,
It's a list of men.
mm,
I know who is out here wanting to teach, willing
mm,
to teach, more than able to teach, right? Um, and somehow something switched. I don't know if it was like in the overculture that switched or in the subculture that we share that switched. But I'm missing women's voices.
mm,
I'm missing women's voices, right? And I'm missing discussing what women are saying with other women, what women are writing, what women are making, what we're teaching. And I'm hoping that Big Crone Energy is a space to reintroduce our voices, right? Um, and especially, um, I'm not going to get into the ageism involved in that because it's clear, right? I
mhm,
don't need to
mhm,
go into it.
mhm.
But I think it's still controversial to name that our voices are drowned out by men's. And I don't know if that's because we allow it or they're better networkers than we are. I think that's it.
I don't know. One of the things that some women of a certain age complain that they're invisible,
Mm,
that they're treated invisibly. And
mm,
that's part of what you're talking about. But I take that as a PowerPoint. That's my
yeah,
superpower. I'm
yeah,
invisible. I can see a lot of what's going on because people don't know I'm witnessing it.
right,
I can discern what's happening because people don't think I'm paying attention. They don't
right,
see me, right? And even in the days of Pantheacon, which was our big festival that we
yeah,
used to have out here, right? Um, I would put in a couple or three, workshop or presentation things, and I was always surprised if I got them all. And finally, one of the people in the programs area said, "Well, we do that because we know you play well with others."
hmm,
I'd learned how to get along.
uh-huh,
Some big make pagans never learned to get along,
right, and
right?
that's why Pantheacon isn't a thing anymore.
It's one of the reasons why. Yes,
Yes,
indeed.
yeah,
All things have their season,
yeah,
and that's a whole other thing. But being invisible, I think, can be used to your advantage as an
mhm,
elder.
mhm,
I think the same thing happens with old men too.
mhm,
I don't think it's just women, but you add the female aspect, and that's there. Now, when you're talking about women's voices in the pagan community, I don't do big events anymore,
mhm,
you know? So I don't even know who's out there,
right,
right? If they're
right,
not local, I probably don't know about them. If they're not Fire Family, I really don't know about them. Fire Family is the later community they had. But I
mhm,
just had a woman who was a part of the earlier 80s pagan movement.
mhm,
And she's just kind of getting back into the dulcimer community. And she asked, who, where do I get my news? And when I sent her a note back, I realized that they're all women except for one guy. Heather Cox Richardson.
yeah,
Jay Kuo is the only guy in the list.
mhm,
Um, Zan Suzanika
mhm,
and her group, An Action a Day Keeps the Demagogues at Bay. Belle of the Ranch, which is on YouTube. Really, really worthwhile. Politics Girl on
yeah,
YouTube and Instagram. And then Reshma Sajani.
yes,
Reshma Sajani is the voice I wish I'd had when I was 40.
mhm, mhm,
So there are strong women's voices out there that are getting
mhm,
out. And for me, I'm kind of done with men's voices. I've had it all my life.
mhm,
And my husband hears this from me. I'm looking for women authors and I'm looking for women songwriters and women performers and women artists. And I've been doing this all along, but
yeah,
I'm like just kind of rabid about it now.
yeah,
Um, and he has just read a book of historical fiction by Philippa Gregory. And he just came by it. I think it was in a free library, you know,
mhm,
in the neighborhood. And he says, there's really something different about the woman's voice in there. And I'm like, yeah, isn't it nice to hear that?
mhm. You know, a woman just translated the myth of Inanna from the original Sumerian, and women are translating the Greek stories as well.
Hmm.
And it's not that they're different stories, they're just told in a really different voice.
Yeah.
So anyways, this Big Crone Energy podcast is sort of like I want our voices to be heard, right? I'm perfectly happy to be invisible for 98% of my life. I live on the mountain. I keep myself busy. I have my grown children. There's a grandbaby on the way.
Oh my goodness. Oh, how exciting.
So exciting, so beautiful, and not something I expected or ever was like, oh, I want that, you know? but here he comes, right?
Mhm,
Soon. My life is good and quiet and creative and I'm not done yet,
mm-mm,
you
mm-mm.
know? I'm not done yet. And I watch other women creators, and I watch, like a particular kind of women, right? That I find them and I follow, and I'm like, "Oh my god, they're amazing. How did I never know about this person?" And I'll look and like, we don't have anyone in common, right? And
Hmm,
I'm like, "Oh, how do I get the people who follow me to follow her?" Right?
hmm,
How do I get how do we amplify one another's voices and one another's talents and one another's passion and what we know after living a long time? um, and that isn't to say, again, that we know everything, right? I think the younger generations have so much to teach us about standing up for ourselves and having boundaries and
mhm,
gender and sexuality and activism and racism. They have so much to teach us about so many things.
mhm.
And and we're not done yet.
No, we're not done yet.
Either, right? And so how do we begin? What can I contribute by
Mhm,
opening spaces for women who have lived long lives in the craft, in pagan community, in their art, in whatever it is that they create, in the healing modalities
mhm.
that they practice? Because I think sometimes the way that we express something, because we've been doing it for so long, comes across like, right? Like, precisely. Um,
The right word.
right, because we've been solving the same problem for
A long
for a
time.
long
Yeah.
time, right? And so when you finally come to that pearl, which arises out of irritation, right? I'm like, I'm trying to solve this problem. I'm trying to solve this problem. I'm trying to solve this problem. And then this pearl arises. And I want this space, this podcast, and some other things that I have planned in the not so distant future to be places where we can share our pearls, um, and also have a cross generational conversation. But again, sorry, I'm not interested in promoting men because
Yeah.
they haven't been interested in promoting us.
Well, this is why I started the Dulcimoon virtual Dulcimer Festival.
Hmm.
It's a product of the pandemic, but it's also a product of understanding that, okay, in the pandemic, a group of players got together because suddenly the folk music circuit of festivals was shut down and everybody lost their work,
Yep.
right? And it may not seem like mountain dulcimer or hammer dulcimer players would be a large part of that, but actually these festivals have incredible loyalty and across the
Mm.
country, and they're all around the world, right? So these five people got together and started doing the virtual Dulcimer Festival. They call it the Quarantunes Virtual Dulcimer Festival. I'm not going to talk long about it, but the idea is that that first festival in June of 2020 had over 2,000 people participating.
Oh.
2,000.
Mm.
And they did it three more times that year, and it has been three times a year ever since. I'm
Wow.
about to do the next one coming up in about a week, right?
Hmm.
And when they did a survey, they found out that fully 60% of the people participating had never been to an in-person festival. They couldn't. They're caregivers. They don't have enough money. They can't travel. They're disabled themselves. The concept of traveling from one state over to three states to another place was just foreign to them.
How
And
much?
quarantine was $10 a class.
Mm.
You eat at home, you sleep at home, no
Right.
gas.
Right.
So if 60% of the people who were participating in this quarantine festival, that's an underserved population.
Yes.
getting online music education. So number one, online music education is a thing, and it's a successful thing.
Yes.
And if there's room for that, there's room for a smaller festival aimed at 100 to 150 people that's women led.
Yeah.
All women teachers, all women leaders, everyone's invited. We have
Yeah.
kids events,
Yeah.
and that has just finished its third successful year,
Fantastic.
right?
Fantastic. Yeah.
And as a result of that, we've started a series of conversations with our dulcimer professionals, our women professionals, on gender equity within the business.
Well, I would
There've
love
been
to sit in on that.
there have been tears, there
Yeah.
have been angry voices, there have been people going, "I am so sorry that's happened for you,"
Yeah.
and sharing similar stories so we know nobody's alone.
Right. Right.
That and the Dulcimoon talks that we're doing with women in the Dulcimer community, that's my proudest work right now.
So beautiful. So beautiful. We are
Yeah,
it's time, you
I
know.
know.
I mean it's time, like we're almost
Yeah,
out of time.
yeah.
But it's time. It's past time uh for us to support one another and for our voices to be heard and for there to
Mhm,
be safe spaces for those stories to be told. I would
mhm,
give anything for a space to tell my story about
mhm,
my experience as a teacher in the craft and,
mm,
where my work is now and who's named their books after my work and et cetera, et
right,
cetera, you know?
right.
And there's no recourse.
Mm,
There's no recourse other than to just carry that and
mhm.
decide, well, am I going to go quiet? So, or am I going to get bigger?
Honey,
And I,
do not go quiet, not you.
yeah, but I think that that is a question for all of us to consider in this moment,
Mm,
in this political moment. And I'm going to
right.
just go
Yeah,
here for a second that I see and read and hear people saying, "Well, I'm gonna back off," or "I'm gonna back away," or "I'm gonna change platforms." And I think we need your voice more now than ever. And I had my moment too, right? Like when we first learned Facebook's latest shenanigans, which are
right,
worse shenanigans than ever. And I thought,
yeah.
I'm leaving, I'm going to Blue Sky. And I thought, wait a minute, I've spent the last 15 years building my small audience comparatively of 3,000 friends and followers, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna walk away,
No.
and they're not gonna follow me because some of us are older and we don't wanna learn a new platform. We don't wanna go somewhere else and then have to go somewhere else and then have to go,
Mhm,
right? And I thought, "No, I'm gonna stay," and then Ali Valkyrie said to me, "Karina, if we all leave, then there's nobody here and we've ceded territory. Concede nothing."
right.
Right? Allie is so wise.
Yeah, I know. I'm following her like crazy right now. She's
Yeah.
another one in my list of people I follow, but I don't follow her for news. I follow her for very grounded understanding of this late
What
stage
is happening?
capitalism we're living through.
Yes, and she was trying to tell us this 15, 20 years ago, and people were like, "I'm not following you, you're crazy, you're disruptive, you're attacking my business," and shoot, they were right the whole
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah.
Um, but now to everybody who's listening, like, your voice matters more now than it
Please,
ever has.
please. And grandmothers are part of evolution. Grandmothers exist. We are still alive and not currently procreating, not able to procreate. And we have an amazing amount of experience.
And we need to share it.
Yes,
It is an imperative. It is
yes.
almost a biological imperative
Yep,
to pass down what we know,
yep.
as well as, I'm going to talk about biology here because I have a grandbaby coming.
Right.
And that baby was in my daughter's eggs when my daughter was in my body. And I just learned the other day this crazy thing, mitochondrium chimerism, shimora, that word, that when we carry children, the infant, while they are in placenta, we are not only sharing our DNA with them, they are sharing their DNA back. And so this is why we look like our partners.
Huh. Huh.
And why, as our next children and next children, if you have more than one, they look more like their sibling because the mother is carrying the first child's DNA in their body, and that is it's it's cuckoo, right?
Yeah.
And just for those of you who are listening and getting nervous because I'm talking about biology, I'm not a gender essentialist.
Mm-mm.
I am very interested, though, in these mysteries that happen between my children and I, right?
Right.
Um, and the mystery of what happened when I hit menopause. And now that I'm out the other side of it, who I am comparatively to
Yep.
who I was 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, but that is not, I am never trans exclusive
Yeah, I know.
at all, at
I
all.
know.
But I want to say that in every show because we
Okay.
talk so much about women and we talk
Mhm.
about women's mysteries and we talk about women's histories and women's voices. And I am 60 years old. I have trans children and I want people to understand that I'm not that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That I can have these lived experiences, and I am very interested to learn what happens for you,
Mhm.
right? When you turn 50 and when you turn 60 and when you turn 70, and
Mhm.
where's your voice and how do you feel about your body then?
Right.
Because we're women,
Right. Right.
right? So I don't make distinctions usually when I'm talking about trans women, I'm not leaving you out. I don't use the language of trans women because I consider you women. So I always want to say something about that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
when we talk about feminism and we are a certain age, unfortunately, we need to clarify who we are.
Yeah. And the thing is that feminism is not
A monolith.
limited. It is not limited to biological women.
Right.
If
Never.
if
Never.
if my feminism was the way of the world, everybody would be happier.
Yes. And
You
this is
know.
why women are speaking. Time to listen, time to speak up more.
That's right. Put a
DJs.
woman in charge.
That's right. DJ, thank you so much for being here. I'm
Sure.
thrilled to have you. And I want to get some of those links that we talked about so that I can put them in the notes